Close your eyes for a moment and notice how your mind starts to fill in shapes, sounds, and patterns on its own. Sometimes reality feels flexible, as if your senses are quietly playing tricks on you. Tonight, we're diving into 100 psychological illusions, little wonders that can calm your mind, spark curiosity, and guide you gently into sleep. Let's wander through the curious world your brain creates when you're halfway between wakefulness and dreams. Fact 1. What are psychological illusions? Have you ever looked at something and thought you knew exactly what it was, only to realize you were completely wrong? That little trick your mind just played on you is what we call a psychological illusion. Unlike a magic trick that happens on stage, these illusions are happening inside your own brain, quietly shaping the way you perceive the world. Imagine staring at a simple pattern, like a series of lines or shapes, and seeing movement that isn't really there. That's your brain filling in gaps, guessing, or exaggerating details based on what it expects. Psychological illusions are everywhere, even in everyday life. When you look at clouds and see animals or faces, or when a hallway looks longer than it actually is, that's your mind interpreting incomplete information. Essentially, illusions happen when your brain's interpretation of reality doesn't match the real physical input. It's not broken, it's just creative, and it's constantly at work. One of the most interesting things about these illusions is that they reveal how much our perception depends on expectation. Your brain is predicting what should happen next, sometimes correctly, sometimes completely off, and that prediction process is what makes illusions so fascinating. They're little reminders that we don't always see the world exactly as it is. So next time something seems odd or out of place, don't worry. It's just your mind doing its job, testing possibilities, and keeping things interesting. After all, life would probably be a lot less entertaining if everything was exactly as it seems. And the best part? Understanding these illusions is like learning the rules of a secret game your brain is always playing. Fact 2. How our brain plays tricks on us. You might think your senses give you a perfect picture of the world, but the truth is your brain is constantly playing little tricks on you. Think about it. You glance at a shadow and swear you saw someone move. Or a pattern in the wallpaper suddenly looks like it's swirling. That's not magic, that's your brain at work, filling in gaps and guessing based on experience, memory, and context. Our brains are prediction machines. Every second they try to anticipate what's coming next to save energy and help us respond faster. Most of the time, this is useful, like catching a ball or noticing someone approaching, but sometimes it creates illusions. You might see motion where there isn't any, hear faint sounds that aren't really there, or feel like something is closer than it actually is. One way this shows up is in optical illusions, where two lines might look different in length, even though they're exactly the same, or in auditory illusions like hearing a word in a song that isn't actually there. It's all about context and expectation. Your brain takes shortcuts, making assumptions that usually work, but occasionally it gets it hilariously wrong. The surprising thing is that these tricks aren't flaws, they're clever strategies. Your mind prioritizes speed over perfect accuracy, and that's what keeps you functioning efficiently. And sometimes, noticing how easily your brain can be fooled can actually be calming, because it reminds you that reality isn't always as rigid as it seems. Next time you notice your mind bending the rules a little, just smile. It's proof that your brain is flexible, curious, and endlessly inventive. A playful companion even in the quietest moments. Fact 3. The difference between illusions and hallucinations. It's easy to get confused between illusions and hallucinations. They both mess with what you perceive, but there's a subtle difference. Illusions happen when your brain misinterprets something real. Imagine looking at a rope in dim light and thinking it's a snake. The rope is real, but your brain interprets it differently. Hallucinations, on the other hand, involve perceiving something that isn't actually there at all. That's the key difference. Illusions twist reality. Hallucinations create new reality from scratch. Illusions are natural. They happen to everyone and often go unnoticed because your brain is usually pretty good at correcting itself. You might see a mirage on a hot road, think a branch is moving in the wind, or misjudge the size of a shadow. Hallucinations, though, are less common and usually indicate an unusual brain state, extreme fatigue, or other factors. Understanding this difference is comforting. Realizing that most perceptual quirks are just illusions means you're not losing touch with reality. They're just the brain doing what it does best, interpreting a complex world. And once you start noticing these illusions, life becomes a little more playful. The world isn't always exactly what it seems, and that's okay. Illusions, in a sense, are reminders that perception is a collaboration between your senses and your brain. They teach patience, observation, and even a sense of wonder for the tiny mysteries hidden in plain sight. So next time your eyes or ears deceive you, think of it as a gentle invitation to notice the magic in the everyday. Fact 4. Why we find illusions fascinating. Why do we stop and stare at optical illusions, videos of impossible objects or patterns that seem to move on their own? It's because illusions tap into something deep in our brain, a combination of curiosity, surprise, and a desire to solve a puzzle. Our brains love trying to figure out what's real and what isn't, and illusions give us the perfect challenge without any danger. There's also a feeling of awe involved. Seeing something that contradicts what we know, even slightly, creates a tiny jolt of surprise. It makes us feel clever when we figure it out and keeps us coming back for more. Illusions let us experience something unexpected, and yet, in a safe way. Your brain gets to exercise its prediction and pattern recognition skills, all while you're just relaxing, staring, or listening. Even more interesting is that illusions often reveal universal brain patterns. People from different cultures, ages, and backgrounds are fooled by the same illusions. That's because certain ways our brains process visual, auditory, and sensory information are shared across humanity. That connection, realizing we all perceive the world in similar ways, adds to the fascination. Illusions are playful. They let us experience the world like a puzzle, where reality isn't fixed, and every perception is a little adventure. They spark curiosity, wonder, and even laughter, reminding us that our minds are flexible, clever, and endlessly inventive. And in that playful twist of reality, we find a small but meaningful joy that lingers long after we look away. Fact 5. How illusions can calm the mind. Here's something unexpected. Illusions aren't just entertaining. They can actually calm the mind. Think about it. When you watch a gently spinning pattern, a slow optical illusion, or listen to a subtle auditory trick, your brain gets caught in the puzzle. For a few moments your thoughts quiet down because you're fully absorbed in figuring it out, or just observing it. It works because illusions engage your brain without overwhelming it. Your attention focuses on one thing, creating a meditative effect. Your mind stops wandering, the day's stress fades, and you experience a sense of flow. Some visual illusions even mimic natural patterns, like rippling water or swaying trees, which our brains associate with relaxation and calm. Auditory illusions like repeating tones or soft binaural beats can have a similar effect. They provide a gentle rhythm for the brain to follow, creating a sense of mental balance. Even tactile illusions like the gentle misperception of a surface or texture can quietly draw your attention inward, calming the senses. Illusions can also remind us that reality is flexible. Seeing that the brain can be fooled in small, harmless ways can reduce rigidity and perfectionism, letting you release tension and just enjoy the experience. It's a gentle nudge toward mindfulness, noticing perception, accepting ambiguity, and letting yourself be fully present. So next time you want to relax, try giving your brain a little playful puzzle. Let the illusion do its work. Sometimes the quiet trickery of your own mind is exactly what you need to unwind. Fact 6. The connection between perception and sleep. Have you ever noticed how your dreams can feel so real, even though you're fast asleep? That's your brain continuing to play its own perception games. Perception and sleep are closely linked, more than most people realize. When we drift into sleep, our senses aren't entirely shut off. Instead, our brain starts blending reality with imagination, creating experiences that feel tangible. That's why a sudden noise can make you jump, or why you might see shapes and movement in the darkness. Even before dreaming, the way we perceive the world while awake influences how our mind settles down at night. If your brain has been constantly processing visual clutter, loud sounds, or stressful stimuli, it can struggle to fully relax. On the other hand, engaging in calm, soothing illusions, like gentle visual patterns or slow auditory tricks, can guide perception into a relaxed state. It's almost like giving your brain a soft signal that it's okay to let go and drift. Interestingly, some illusions are more effective than others at preparing the mind for sleep. Patterns that appear to move slowly, optical illusions that flow gently, or auditory illusions that mimic natural rhythms help slow down thought processes and quiet the constant internal chatter. In that way, understanding perception isn't just a curiosity, it's a tool to influence how restful our sleep can be. So, the next time you notice your mind wandering at night, remember, perception and sleep are part of the same system. By observing, guiding, and sometimes gently tricking your senses, you can create a smoother path into dreamland. Sleep isn't just rest, it's another stage for the mind's endless game of interpretation. Fact 7. The role of attention in experiencing illusions. Attention is like a spotlight. It decides what your brain focuses on and what it ignores. And when it comes to illusions, that spotlight is everything. Many illusions don't exist in isolation. They rely on your attention to bring them to life. For example, a pattern might only appear to move if you focus on a specific point, or a shadow might only look eerie when your mind is caught between expectations. What's fascinating is how selective attention can change the very experience of reality. When you pay close attention to details, you see nuances and tricks you'd otherwise miss. When your attention drifts, the illusion can seem to vanish, or even transform into something completely different. It's a reminder that perception is never passive. Your brain isn't just recording reality, it's actively choosing how to interpret it. This also explains why some illusions are so captivating. They demand your focus, and in doing so, they draw you in and quiet the rest of the world. You become present in a way that few other things can achieve. That's why focusing on a calming illusion before sleep, like a slowly spinning shape, can feel almost meditative. The role of attention shows that perception is as much about where we look as what we see, and in that tiny gap between observation and expectation, illusions quietly teach us that the mind is active, playful, and endlessly creative. Fact 8. How expectation shapes what we see. Have you ever walked into a dimly lit room and thought you saw something that wasn't there, only to realize it was a coat on a chair? That's expectation at work. Our brains are constantly predicting what should happen next, and those predictions can dramatically influence perception. Essentially, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we expect it to be. Expectations act like a filter. If you expect danger, shadows look threatening. If you expect calm, even ambiguous shapes can feel soothing. That's why optical illusions often fool us. They present something our brain interprets based on prior experience rather than actual reality. Your mind fills in gaps, smooths rough edges, and sometimes invents details that aren't there. Interestingly, expectation doesn't just create errors, it can enhance enjoyment and engagement. Anticipating a twist in an illusion adds a sense of surprise and delight, and when your expectations are gently contradicted, your brain experiences a tiny spark of wonder. Understanding this can be especially calming before sleep. When you realize that much of what you perceive is shaped by expectations, it becomes easier to let go of control and simply observe. Reality isn't always fixed, and your brain knows it. That flexibility can be strangely reassuring, helping your mind ease into rest. Fact 9. The influence of memory on perception. Memory isn't just about the past, it's actively shaping what you see and hear right now. Every time you experience an illusion, your brain is comparing current input to stored experiences. That's why two people can look at the same image and perceive it differently. Their memories are different, and their brains are making unique predictions. Even subtle memories can influence perception. A pattern that reminds you of something familiar might seem to move differently, or a sound might trigger a word you know, even if it wasn't actually spoken. Memory acts as a bridge between reality and interpretation, coloring every experience with personal context. This connection is why illusions can feel so personal and engaging. They tap into past experiences, creating a sense of recognition or surprise that feels uniquely yours, and that's also why reflecting on illusions can be relaxing. The mind gently revisits familiar patterns while still enjoying something novel. Perception and memory are in constant dialogue, quietly shaping each other. Recognizing this interplay can deepen your appreciation of illusions and even help soothe the mind. knowing that the brain's creativity is a natural, comforting part of life. Fact 10. How illusions reveal the brain's hidden patterns. One of the most amazing things about illusions is how they let us peek behind the curtain of the brain. When you experience an illusion, it's not just a trick, it's evidence of how your mind organizes, predicts, and interprets information. Certain patterns of lines, colors, or sounds exploit these hidden strategies, revealing the shortcuts your brain constantly takes. For example, illusions show that your brain prefers symmetry, continuity, and grouping. It fills in gaps, smooths rough edges, and even invents motion. By observing which illusions fool you, you get a small glimpse into the invisible architecture of perception, patterns that normally operate without your awareness. This insight is quietly empowering. Recognizing these hidden patterns reminds you that your mind is incredibly sophisticated and playful, capable of bending reality in subtle, harmless ways, and sometimes, just noticing these tricks is enough to spark a sense of wonder and calm. Proof that even the brain's missteps are fascinating and comforting. In a way, every illusion is a little mirror, reflecting not the world but the inner workings of your own mind, a playful reminder of how imaginative and clever we really are. Fact 11. The spinning spiral illusion. Have you ever stared at a spiral and felt like it was moving, even though it was completely still? That's the spinning spiral illusion at work, a perfect example of how our brains can't always trust what the eyes see. When you focus on a spiral for a few seconds and then look away, you might even feel like the world around you is gently spinning. It's disorienting in the most fascinating way. The illusion happens because of how our visual system processes motion. Your brain tries to detect movement in patterns of light and dark, and the spiral exaggerates these signals, creating a false sense of rotation. Even though the image isn't moving at all, your neurons are firing in a way that convinces you otherwise. It's a playful reminder that perception is more about interpretation than direct recording. What's even cooler is the after effect, the motion you see after looking away. This is called the motion after effect, or sometimes the waterfall illusion, because staring at falling water can make stationary objects appear to drift upward afterward. The spiral illusion taps into the same mechanism, tricking the brain temporarily. Interestingly, the spinning spiral is often used in relaxation exercises, surprisingly. When observed carefully, the gentle, repetitive motion can guide attention and induce a mild meditative state. Your brain gets absorbed in following the movement, and the rest of the world quietly fades away. So next time you watch a spiral swirl before your eyes, don't just see it as a trick, see it as an invitation. An invitation to notice how clever your brain is, how easily it can be fooled, and how even a simple pattern can create a tiny moment of awe. It's a little reminder that perception is always more magical than we think. Fact 12. The checker shadow illusion. Imagine looking at a checkerboard and seeing two squares that appear completely different in colour. Now imagine finding out that they are actually the same shade. That's the checker shadow illusion, and it's one of the most striking examples of how context shapes perception. Your brain doesn't just see colours, it interprets them relative to surrounding shades and light. In the checkerboard, one square is under shadow and the other is in the light. Even though they reflect the same amount of light to your eyes, your brain compensates for the shadow, creating the illusion that one square is darker. This illusion reveals how perceptual shortcuts work. Your mind automatically factors in lighting conditions, trying to maintain consistency in the world. Most of the time, this is incredibly useful, helping you recognize objects in different environments. But in this carefully designed setup, your brain is caught off guard and convinced of something that isn't true. It's fascinating because it reminds us that reality isn't absolute. It's filtered through the brain's calculations, and noticing these illusions can actually be calming. When you realize that your brain can misjudge something as simple as a square on a checkerboard, it's a gentle reminder that uncertainty is natural, and perception is flexible. So next time you see a shadow or a pattern that seems off, pause, appreciate the brain's clever tricks, and let yourself marvel at the hidden calculations constantly shaping what you see. Fact 13. The cafe wall illusion picture. A tiled wall where the lines between rows seem to slope, zigzag, or tilt. Even though the lines are perfectly straight, That's the cafe wall illusion, named after the wall outside a cafe in Bristol where it was first noticed. It's simple, yet captivating, and it shows just how easily the brain can be fooled. The illusion occurs because of the way alternating dark and light tiles interact with the lines separating them. Your visual system interprets the pattern as a shift or tilt, even though there isn't one. Essentially, your brain is overinterpreting contrast, creating a misalignment that feels obvious and undeniable. What's amazing is how this illusion reveals the subtlety of visual processing. Even straight, orderly lines can appear bent under certain contexts. It's a reminder that the brain doesn't passively record information. It actively interprets, predicts, and sometimes exaggerates. Cafe wall illusions are more than just fun. They can also be meditative. Watching the patterns slowly resolve in your mind or focusing on individual tiles encourages sustained attention and presence. And as your gaze follows the lines, the brain can experience a calm satisfaction from recognizing the trick while observing it unfold. In the end, the cafe wall illusion is a gentle invitation to notice that the world you see is a blend of reality and perception. Even the straightest lines have secrets. If you take the time to look closely. Fact 14. The hearing illusion. Here's a curious one. Two straight lines, parallel to each other, appear to bow outward when placed over radiating background lines. That's the hearing illusion, and it's a classic example of how background context can warp perception. Your brain is designed to interpret depth, motion, and perspective. When radial lines converge, the brain assumes a three-dimensional space, and it adjusts the perception of straight lines accordingly. What you see as bowed lines is actually the brain's interpretation of space and depth, not an error of the eyes. The hearing illusion is fascinating because it's subtle yet undeniable. It shows that perception is active. The brain isn't just observing, it's predicting, simulating, and sometimes miscalculating. And the illusion feels almost playful, a small wink from your mind letting you know it's working behind the scenes. Interestingly, the illusion can be calming to watch. Following the lines with your eyes, noticing the bow, and understanding why it happens can create a gentle, absorbing focus. It's almost like a visual meditation, where your attention quietly centers and your mind rests from wandering thoughts. Next time you encounter converging lines or radial patterns, take a moment. Let the hearing illusion remind you that perception is never passive, that your mind is clever and playful, and that even simple lines can hold surprising mysteries. Fact 15. The Müller-Lyer illusion. Here's one that's been puzzling people for over a century. Two lines of identical length appear dramatically different because of the arrow-like ends at each tip. That's the Müller-Lyer illusion, a classic in the study of visual perception. The trick lies in how the brain interprets depth and perspective. The arrows give a cue that one line is extending away or toward you, even though it's flat on the page. Your mind subconsciously applies real-world rules to a two-dimensional image, and voila! The illusion is born. What's fascinating is that this illusion feels so convincing. You can measure the lines, know they're the same, yet your eyes stubbornly insist otherwise. It's a playful reminder that perception is not infallible. It's shaped by experience, context, and expectation. Beyond the fun of being fooled, the Müller-Lyer illusion can also invite calm focus. Watching it closely, observing the conflict between what your eyes see and what you know, can be oddly absorbing. It's a small, harmless mental puzzle that draws attention and quiets the rest of the mind. In the end, the Müller-Lyer illusion is more than just a trick. It's a glimpse into the cleverness of your own brain, proof that perception is an active, imaginative, and endlessly intriguing process. Fact 16. The Ponzo illusion. Have you ever looked at two identical lines over a pair of converging lines and thought one was longer than the other? That's the Ponzo illusion, and it's a perfect example of how context tricks your brain. Those converging lines make your mind interpret depth, like a railway track stretching into the distance. Suddenly, one line seems farther away and your brain exaggerates its size. It's fascinating because it shows just how much our perception depends on surroundings. The lines themselves haven't changed, but the brain interprets them as part of a three-dimensional world. Essentially, your brain applies real-world rules to a flat image, and the result is a convincing misjudgment. This illusion also reminds us how automatic these judgments are. We rarely notice how often the brain relies on context to make sense of size, distance, or shape. It's a quiet process, happening without conscious effort, shaping our experience of the world in ways we barely realize. Interestingly, the Ponzo illusion has a calming side too. Watching how your perception shifts and understanding why your brain is fooled can be quietly absorbing. There's something meditative about noticing the misalignment between what you see and what you know, and letting your attention linger on it. Next time you see parallel lines converging in the distance, take a moment to appreciate the subtlety of perception. The Ponzo illusion isn't just a trick, it's a gentle reminder that our brains are constantly interpreting, predicting, and finding meaning, even in the simplest of shapes. Fact 17. The Ebbinghaus illusion. Here's a fun one. Two identical circles can look completely different in size depending on the circle surrounding them. That's the Ebbinghaus illusion. If one circle is surrounded by smaller circles, it appears larger. If surrounded by bigger ones, it appears smaller. Your brain doesn't just see the central circle, it interprets it relative to its context. This illusion is fascinating because it shows how perception is comparative. We rarely perceive objects in isolation. Everything is judged against what surrounds it, and the Ebbinghaus illusion exaggerates that process. Even knowing the trick, your eyes will keep insisting the circles are different. The Ebbinghaus illusion is more than a curiosity. It's a reminder that context influences everything we see. It's like a gentle nudge from your brain, showing that even simple judgments, like size, aren't absolute. What's calming about this illusion is that it encourages close observation. You notice relationships between shapes, how perspective works, and how interpretation can shift instantly. It's absorbing without being stressful, a quiet way to watch the brain play with reality. So next time you look at objects in comparison, remember the Ebbinghaus illusion. Your perception is active, playful, and influenced by subtle cues, and that's part of what makes everyday life quietly fascinating. Fact 18. The Poggendorf illusion. The Poggendorf illusion is a subtle one. A diagonal line interrupted by a vertical block seems misaligned on either side, even though it continues perfectly straight. Stare at it for a moment, and you might feel your eyes and brain arguing over the line's path. This illusion happens because your brain misjudges angles and intersections. It's trying to interpret the interrupted line as part of a larger spatial scene, and in doing so, it creates a small but convincing misperception. The brain's rules for continuity and geometry temporarily override reality. What's fascinating is how consistently this illusion fools people. Even when you know the line is straight, your perception stubbornly resists. That stubbornness shows how deeply ingrained these perceptual shortcuts are, quietly shaping the way we interpret intersections, edges, and alignment in everyday life. The Poggendorf illusion also encourages mindful observation. Focusing on the line, noticing the misalignment, and understanding why your brain is fooled can be oddly meditative. It draws attention and curiosity at the same time, offering a small moment of reflection on how clever and playful your mind really is. So the next time you see an interrupted line, smile. The Poggendorf illusion is a tiny reminder that even straightforward things can hide surprises if you're paying attention. Fact 19. The motion after effect, waterfall illusion. Here's a strange one. Stare at a waterfall or any downward motion for a while, then look away at a stationary object and suddenly it appears to drift upward. That's the motion after effect or waterfall illusion, and it's a striking demonstration of how motion perception works in the brain. What's happening is that neurons sensitive to motion become temporarily tired after prolonged exposure. When you shift your gaze, the balance of neural activity causes stationary objects to appear as if they're moving in the opposite direction. It's a trick, but it's rooted in real neural mechanisms. This illusion is fascinating because it reveals the hidden rhythms of perception. Motion isn't just detected, it's interpreted continuously, with neurons adjusting and compensating constantly. And when that system is pushed just enough, the brain temporarily misjudges reality, creating a subtle but undeniable effect. Interestingly, the motion after effect can be quietly mesmerizing. Watching a waterfall, feeling the illusion unfold and noticing the world seemingly drift afterward can draw your attention and encourage calm focus. It's a gentle way to experience perception in action. So next time you watch a flowing stream or a spinning pattern, let the illusion remind you that perception is dynamic, playful, and endlessly intriguing. Your brain is constantly moving, even when the world around you seems still. Fact 20. How colors affect our visual illusions. Colors do more than decorate the world. They can trick the mind in subtle ways. Certain color combinations, contrasts, or gradients can make shapes appear larger, smaller, closer, or farther than they really are. Even simple illusions often rely on color to fool the eyes. Take complementary colors, for example. Placing two contrasting hues side by side can create a sense of vibration or motion, even in a static image. Warm colors might seem to advance, cool colors to recede. Your brain interprets these cues automatically, shaping depth, size, and movement. Color also influences perception of brightness and contrast. A grey square on a blue background might appear darker than the same square on a yellow background. Your brain constantly calculates how light interacts with surfaces, and color cues are part of that equation. Understanding how colors shape illusions is calming in itself. When you notice how the mind responds, you realize that perception is active, interpretive, and sensitive to subtle cues. Colors become more than decoration. They're tools for the brain's playful experiments. Next time you look at a colorful pattern, pause. Notice how your perception shifts, how contrasts and shades influence what you see, and appreciate the quiet complexity of your mind. In those little color tricks, there's a gentle, fascinating lesson about how our brains see the world. Fact 21. The shepherd tone illusion. Have you ever listened to a sound that seems to rise endlessly, climbing higher and higher, yet never actually getting any higher? That's the shepherd tone illusion, a fascinating auditory trick that makes a single note appear like an infinite ascending scale. It's like auditory magic, and once you hear it, you can't quite unhear it. The illusion works because multiple tones are layered together, each separated by octaves. As one tone fades out, another fades in, creating the impression of a continuous rise or fall. Your brain interprets this combination as a never-ending climb, even though the overall pitch never changes. It's a perfect example of how our auditory perception can be deceived by clever patterns. What makes it fascinating, and a little hypnotic, is that the shepherd tone taps directly into how our ears and brain process sound. It exploits expectations, pitch recognition, and continuity all at once. And surprisingly, it can even be used in relaxing or immersive audio experiences. Some composers and sound designers use it to create tension or to subtly guide attention without overwhelming the listener. The illusion reminds us that hearing isn't just passive. Your brain actively interprets the layers of sound, creating an experience that feels larger than reality. Next time you listen to music or ambient tones, consider how the mind is filling in gaps, predicting patterns, and creating sensations that don't really exist. The shepherd tone is a playful reminder of the brain's creativity, proving that perception, like imagination, is limitless. Fact 22. The McGurk effect. Here's a strange one. Imagine watching someone say bear while hearing fay, and suddenly your brain hears vai. That's the McGurk effect, a perfect example of how vision and hearing interact to shape perception. What you see influences what you hear, and sometimes the combination creates something entirely new. This illusion shows how integrated our senses are. The brain doesn't treat sight and sound separately. It combines them to make sense of the world. When conflicting cues appear, your mind merges them into a compromise, producing a perception that's different from both the visual and auditory input alone. The McGurk effect is fascinating because it's universal. People across cultures experience it, highlighting shared mechanisms in human perception. It also demonstrates the brain's constant drive to interpret and resolve ambiguity, even if that resolution is wrong. Interestingly, noticing this effect can be calming. Observing how your senses interact and how easily perception can be influenced encourages mindfulness. It's a gentle way to see that reality isn't rigid and that the mind is always creatively engaged. The McGurk effect is a playful illustration of sensory teamwork and a quiet reminder that your brain is always more inventive than you realize. Fact 23. Phantom words and the brain's guesswork. Sometimes your mind hears words that aren't really there. These are called phantom words, sounds that seem meaningful even though they are actually ambiguous noise. The brain has a strong tendency to seek patterns, and language is one of its favourite patterns to detect. Phantom words occur because your mind is constantly predicting, filling in gaps, and guessing at what it expects to hear. If a sound resembles speech, your brain often interprets it as actual words, especially if you're already anticipating language. That's why a low hum or repetitive noise can sometimes sound like distant chatter or whispered phrases. This illusion is fascinating because it shows just how actively our brains construct reality. Hearing isn't just recording vibrations, it's a guessing game, constantly shaped by expectation, context, and memory. And these phantom words can be oddly soothing, like your mind is softly whispering stories in the background, engaging without stress or pressure. Next time you notice ambiguous sounds, enjoy the gentle trickery. Phantom words remind us that perception is creative, playful, and deeply interpretive. Even silence can be filled with subtle illusions, if you pay attention. Fact 24. Binaural beats and sleep perception. Have you ever heard two slightly different tones in each ear and felt a pulsing rhythm in your head? That's the effect of binaural beats, an auditory illusion that can influence brainwaves and relaxation. When each ear receives a slightly different frequency, the brain perceives a beat at the difference between the two, creating a rhythmic experience that isn't physically present. Binaural beats are often used to enhance focus, meditation, or sleep. By selecting specific frequencies, it's possible to nudge brain activity toward calm, slow waves associated with relaxation and rest. The effect isn't magical, but it is subtle and fascinating, showing how sound can guide perception and even influence mental states. What's compelling is that this illusion works quietly. You don't need to actively concentrate, just listen and let the rhythm guide your attention. It's a gentle way to encourage mindfulness, focus, or winding down for sleep, without forcing effort or tension. Next time you're struggling to unwind, try noticing a slow, subtle rhythm in sound. Binaural beats are a reminder that perception doesn't just happen in vision, it's a full sensory experience, and your mind is always ready to respond even in the softest ways. Fact 25. The tritone paradox. Here's a curious auditory illusion. Play two notes separated by a tritone, and some people hear the pitch ascending while others hear it descending. That's the tritone paradox, a demonstration of how perception isn't just about sound, it's about context, experience, and brain interpretation. This illusion shows that even the most basic musical intervals aren't perceived identically by everyone. Your previous experiences with pitch, culture, and language influence how you interpret the same tones. In other words, what seems obvious to one listener may be completely different for another. The tritone paradox is fascinating because it highlights the subjectivity of perception. It reminds us that what we hear isn't always universal, and that the mind actively constructs reality from sensory input. Listening to this paradox can be quietly absorbing. Focusing on the ambiguity, noticing how your brain interprets sound, and reflecting on the variability across listeners can be a gentle mental exercise. It's a playful reminder that perception is personal, inventive, and endlessly intriguing. A subtle invitation to experience sound in a more mindful, present way. Fact 26. How silence can trick the ear. It might sound strange, but silence can actually play tricks on your perception. When there's a brief pause in sound, your brain doesn't just register nothing, it fills in the gap. That's why you might hear a missing beat in a song, or imagine a faint noise in a quiet room. This happens because your brain is always predicting what comes next. Silence creates a kind of expectation, and when the expected sound doesn't arrive, the mind generates its own version to keep continuity. It's a harmless illusion, but one that reminds us just how active perception really is. What's fascinating is that these auditory gaps can be calming. The brain enjoys moments of quiet, but it also likes engagement. Silence becomes a gentle playground, a space where the mind can anticipate, imagine, and create sound without any pressure. This is why moments of quiet can feel almost meditative, even if the brain is quietly filling in the blanks. Next time you're in a calm, silent room, notice how your ears aren't just passively listening. They're actively predicting, imagining, and interacting with the world. Silence isn't empty. It's an invisible illusion, shaping perception in subtle, fascinating ways. Fact 27. Repetition illusions in music. Ever listened to a repeating sound or melody and felt like it changes slightly with each repetition, even though it hasn't? That's the magic of repetition illusions in music. Your brain begins to notice patterns, anticipate what comes next, and sometimes hears tiny shifts that aren't there. This illusion works because the brain is wired to detect novelty. When something repeats, attention drifts, and subtle expectations or context shifts create the sense of change. A note may feel louder, softer, or more drawn out simply because the mind is adjusting to the repetition. Interestingly, repetition illusions can be relaxing. The predictable rhythm soothes the brain, while the imagined variations keep it gently engaged. That's why looping tracks or ambient music can feel both calming and slightly mesmerizing. Your perception is active, but never stressed. Next time you notice a melody seeming to morph slightly, enjoy it. Your brain is quietly experimenting, adding depth to simple sounds, and proving that perception is playful, flexible, and endlessly creative. Fact 28. Auditory mislocalization. Have you ever heard a sound and thought it came from one direction, only to realize it was coming from somewhere else entirely? That's auditory mislocalization, a trick of the ears and brain that highlights how perception isn't perfect. Your brain uses timing and volume differences between ears to locate sounds. But certain frequencies, echoes, or overlapping noises can confuse it, making a sound appear farther, closer, or in a different direction. It's not an error, it's just your brain interpreting incomplete information. Auditory mislocalization can be oddly absorbing. Paying attention to where sounds seem to come from and noticing the discrepancy can quietly focus the mind and create a small sense of wonder. It reminds us that hearing is an active, interpretive process, not just passive reception. So next time a sound seems to surprise you, let it be a gentle reminder. Perception is personal, flexible, and full of little illusions that keep life interesting. Fact 29. The illusion of increasing or decreasing volume. Sometimes a constant sound can feel like it's getting louder or softer, even when it isn't. This is the illusion of increasing or decreasing volume, and it shows how the brain interprets intensity relative to context, expectation, and surrounding sounds. For example, a background hum may seem to grow if your attention drifts toward it, or fade if your focus shifts elsewhere. Your brain adjusts perceived loudness based on memory, anticipation, and contrast with other sounds, creating a small but convincing auditory illusion. What's fascinating is how this can affect mood. Perceived changes in volume can be calming or exciting, depending on the context. Noticing the illusion can even promote mindfulness, encouraging you to focus on sound in the moment rather than letting thoughts wander. So the next time a sound seems to subtly swell or shrink, enjoy the gentle trickery. It's another reminder that perception is active, playful, and full of surprises. Fact 30. Sound illusions that calm the mind. Not all illusions are about being fooled, they can also soothe. Certain auditory illusions like slow rhythms, gentle repetition, or subtle shifts in tone can quietly engage the brain while promoting relaxation. Your mind focuses just enough to notice patterns without feeling challenged or stressed. For example, binaural beats, softly repeating melodies, or slowly modulating tones encourage attention and create a sense of flow. Even the shepherd tone or subtle repetition illusions can calm the mind because they give the brain a predictable but intriguing pattern to follow. These illusions work in part because perception isn't just passive, it's an active process. By guiding attention and gently stimulating expectation, auditory illusions can lead to a quiet, meditative state. It's a playful kind of engagement, where the brain participates without pressure. Next time you're winding down, try listening to subtle sound illusions. Notice how perception guides attention, how patterns emerge, and how your mind relaxes in response. It's a small but powerful reminder that even a little playful trickery can be deeply soothing. Fact 31. The rubber hand illusion. There's something strangely comforting about watching your mind fall for a simple trick. Imagine sitting at a table, your real hand hidden, while a fake rubber hand rests in front of you. Someone gently strokes both your hidden hand and the rubber one at the same time. After a while, something odd happens. You start to feel like the rubber hand is your own. That moment of confusion, when your brain adopts the fake hand, is the rubber hand illusion. It works because your mind loves matching what it sees with what it feels. When sight and touch line up perfectly, the brain treats the visual hand as the real one, because it seems like the most reasonable explanation. What makes this illusion so fascinating is how quickly it happens. Just a minute or two of synchronized touches, and the brain begins shifting its sense of ownership. It shows how flexible the body map inside your mind really is, how it updates, adapts, and rearranges itself without you even noticing. And there's something calming about understanding this flexibility. It reminds you that the mind isn't rigid, and perception isn't fixed. Even your sense of where you begin can shift gently depending on signals and attention. The next time you notice your awareness drifting into your hands or fingers as you relax, remember that your brain is quietly shaping that feeling. And sometimes, all it takes is a soft touch and a little focus for the mind to reshape its own story. Fact 32. The thermal grill illusion. If you've ever touched warm and cool metal at the same time, you might have noticed your brain sending mixed messages. The thermal grill illusion is one of those strange experiences where alternating warm and cool bars create a sensation that feels sharper or more intense than either temperature should cause alone. What's interesting is that neither the warm bars nor the cool bars are extreme on their own. They're mild, almost soothing. But when the brain receives both signals at once, the combination becomes confusing. Instead of treating them separately, the mind tries to merge them, and in doing so creates a new sensation that wasn't actually there. This illusion shows how deeply interconnected temperature perception is. Warmth and coolness don't exist in isolation. Your brain compares them, balances them, and interprets them relative to each other. When the signals conflict, the result becomes something unexpected. What makes the thermal grill illusion quietly fascinating is how it reveals the brain's constant effort to make sense of sensory input. It doesn't like ambiguity, so it creates an explanation, sometimes an intense one, to account for the mixed messages. Next time you notice how soothing temperature shifts can be when you're trying to fall asleep, a cool pillow, warm blankets, remember that your brain is always blending these sensations, shaping comfort from contrast. Fact 33. Phantom limb sensations. It's surprising how the mind can hold on to a part of the body even when it's no longer there. Phantom limb sensations happen when someone feels an arm, leg, or hand that isn't physically present anymore. They might feel warmth, movement, or pressure, almost as if the limb still exists in an invisible space. This illusion occurs because the brain keeps a map of the entire body, even after changes. That map doesn't disappear overnight. Instead, the brain continues sending signals, expecting responses, and maintaining the sense of presence out of habit. What's interesting is that phantom sensations aren't always dramatic. Sometimes they're gentle, like the feeling of a hand resting or a slight movement that isn't real. It shows how strong the mind's internal representation of the body is, and how connected identity is to sensation. The fascinating part is understanding how resilient the brain's patterns are. Even when reality changes, the mind holds on to structure, memory, and perception. And that's a quiet comfort. The mind is always trying to stay whole, even when things shift. Fact 34. The Aristotle illusion. Here's a small trick you can try any time. Cross your fingers and gently touch a small object, like the tip of a pencil. Suddenly it may feel like you're touching two pencils instead of one. That's the Aristotle illusion. A simple but surprisingly effective sensory trick. It happens because when your fingers are crossed, your brain receives touch signals in a pattern it doesn't usually encounter. It expects each finger to contact a different object when positioned that way. So when both fingers touch a single object, the brain interprets it as two. This illusion shows how perception relies heavily on typical experience. The mind learns patterns over time, and when something breaks the pattern, it fills in the most familiar explanation, even if it's wrong. There's something calming about noticing this. It reminds you that perception isn't rigid, it's based on habits, expectations, and the familiar. And when those patterns change, the mind responds in creative ways. The next time you cross your fingers or feel sensations overlap, notice how quickly your brain tries to make sense of it. Sometimes the simplest touch can reveal how deeply patterned your perception is. Fact 35. Proprioceptive drift. Proprioceptive drift is a gentle, almost dreamlike illusion, where your sense of where your body is begins to shift. It often happens during experiments like the rubber hand illusion, when you start feeling as though your real hand is drifting toward the fake one. The mind blends visual information with touch and internal signals, creating a gradual shift in awareness. It's not sudden, it's soft, almost like drifting into a daydream. You know your hand hasn't actually moved, but your sense of it quietly shifts. This illusion shows how much your brain relies on sight to guide body awareness. When vision suggests one thing and touch suggests another, your mind merges the two in a way that feels smooth and natural. There's something relaxing about noticing this drift. It mirrors that feeling you get when you're lying in bed, eyes closed, and your awareness of your body becomes soft and unfocused. You feel like you're floating slightly, even though you haven't moved at all. Proprioceptive drift is a gentle reminder of how fluid the mind can be, how awareness shifts, blurs, and reshapes itself, especially when you're calm. And sometimes, drifting a little is exactly what the mind needs. Fact 36. Touch illusions and body awareness. It's surprising how easily the sense of touch can bend and shift. You might think touch is the most straightforward of all senses. Something makes contact and you feel it. But the truth is gentler and far more interesting. Your brain doesn't just register touch, it interprets it, shapes it, and sometimes misinterprets it in wonderfully curious ways. Take simple experiments where two brushes move in perfect sync, one on your hand and one on something nearby. After a few moments, your brain begins pulling both sensations together, blurring the lines between where the touch is happening and where you think it should be happening. Suddenly awareness drifts. The touch feels extended or moved or shared between spaces. These touch illusions reveal how your body map isn't fixed. It's flexible, responsive, and constantly adjusting based on sight, rhythm, and expectation. And in a strange way, that flexibility can be soothing. It's like discovering that your mind isn't rigidly locked into the physical world. It dances with it, reshapes it, and enjoys the gentle puzzle of sensation. The next time you feel your awareness drift, maybe your hand feels lighter or your arm feels distant, let it happen. Your mind is simply adjusting, relaxing, and letting perception float a little. Sometimes that quiet shift is the first sign you're settling toward rest. Fact 37. How sensory conflicts create comforting oddities. You'd think that when senses disagree, the result would be uncomfortable, but surprisingly, some sensory conflicts feel oddly pleasant, little mismatches between sight, touch, or sound that create a strange sense of calm. Imagine hearing a soft rustle but seeing nothing move, or feeling a faint vibration with no clear source. The mind tries to solve the puzzle, but instead of panicking, it settles into curiosity. That curiosity becomes a kind of comfort. The brain likes exploring patterns, even unusual ones. Some illusions arise from this exact moment of conflict, when expectation meets gentle confusion. The senses send mixed messages, and the brain weaves them into something new. Sometimes the result is a floating feeling, or a sense of lightness, or a soft tingling that doesn't quite match its source. These odd sensations create a little mental pause. You slow down, pay attention, and become more aware of the present moment, almost like slipping into a quiet meditative state without even trying. So the next time your senses disagree in a small, harmless way, enjoy it. Those comforting oddities are the mind-stretching, exploring, and finding peace in the unfamiliar. Fact 38. Multisensory illusions for relaxation. Some illusions are complicated, but others are surprisingly gentle. Simple combinations of sound, touch, and sight that soothe the mind. Multisensory illusions happen when two or more senses blend together, creating an experience that feels richer than reality. Take soft rhythmic tapping paired with slow ambient sound. The brain starts syncing them, creating a sense of flow that wasn't physically there. Add a dim light flickering in a steady pattern, and suddenly the senses begin to harmonize. You feel calmer without knowing why. These illusions work because the brain loves coherence. When different senses line up, even imperfectly, the mind relaxes. It feels guided, grounded, and gently focused. That's why certain breathing videos, soft tactile patterns, or even slow visual loops feel strangely soothing. They create a small illusion of unity, where every sense participates. You don't have to think about it. The illusion happens naturally as your mind blends signals into a steady rhythm. And when that rhythm forms, relaxation follows quietly behind. Next time you want to unwind, try pairing a soft texture with a slow sound. Let your senses overlap. Let them blend. Sometimes peace arrives when your perception gently lines itself up. Fact 39. Pressure and vibration. Illusions. Pressure and vibration are two sensations that love to trick the brain. Even a mild vibration can feel stronger when paired with a gentle press, or softer when paired with warmth. Sometimes a tap feels delayed, or a buzz feels like it's spreading even though it isn't. These illusions happen because the receptors in your skin don't just send signals, they interact. When pressure and vibration overlap, the brain tries to separate them or combine them depending on what seems most logical. And when the signals don't match perfectly, your mind fills in the gaps, creating a sensation that doesn't exist in the physical world. But here's the relaxing part. Vibration illusions often feel soothing. A small buzz can ripple outward, making the hand feel lighter. A steady pressure can quiet the mind and anchor your awareness. And when the two blend in just the right way, you get that soft, floating feeling, like your hand is both grounded and drifting. It's one of the simplest reminders that your body can guide you into calmness without effort. Just sensation, rhythm, and the brain's gentle imagination working together. Fact 40. Sensory substitution illusions. Sensory substitution sounds complicated, but it's actually one of the most elegant illusions the brain performs. It happens when one sense takes over the job of another, like using touch to feel a shape you can't see, or using sound to understand distance or direction. The mind doesn't panic when it loses information. It adapts, it reroutes, it reshapes the experience using whatever senses are available. And sometimes, the substitution becomes so smooth that you hardly notice it's happening. This illusion shows how deeply creative perception is. A simple vibration can represent movement, a soft tone can represent space, a texture can represent motion, and your brain accepts these substitutions instantly, building a full picture from tiny clues. What makes sensory substitution calming is the effortlessness of it. Your mind naturally finds patterns, even when they're symbolic or incomplete. The illusion becomes a soft mental puzzle, engaging just enough to keep thoughts grounded, but gentle enough to lull you toward rest. If you've ever relied on sound in the dark or touch to navigate a quiet room, you've already felt this illusion in action. And in those moments, the brain shows its quiet brilliance, rearranging the senses with calm confidence, guiding you softly through the world. Fact 41. The Mandela Effect. Have you ever remembered something clearly, only to find out it never happened that way? That strange experience has a name: the Mandela Effect. People vividly recall events, quotes, or details differently than they actually occurred, sometimes shared by dozens, even hundreds of people. The effect is named after Nelson Mandela, because many people were certain he died in prison decades before he actually passed away. But it's not about Mandela himself. It's about how memory works. Our minds are constantly reconstructing past experiences, filling in gaps with expectations, context, or things we think we remember. The Mandela effect shows just how creative our memory is. It's not wrong, it's flexible, adaptive, and often comforting. Memories don't exist like exact photographs. They're more like stories we retell to ourselves, edited along the way. That's why you can feel absolutely certain of a detail, only to find it was never exactly as you remember. Interestingly, noticing these false memories can be oddly soothing. It reminds you that the mind is imaginative, that reality is interpreted, and that certainty is not always necessary for peace. You can observe the quirkiness of memory without judgment, enjoying the mystery of what the brain fills in. Next time you recall something that doesn't quite match the facts, take a moment to marvel at the mind's creativity. The Mandela effect is less a trick and more a gentle reminder of how perception and memory work hand in hand, soft, imperfect, and surprisingly fascinating. Fact 42. False memories and comforting errors. Memory isn't perfect. Sometimes it's downright creative. False memories occur when the mind fills in gaps with imagined details, plausible guesses, or information suggested by others. And here's the surprising part: they can feel completely real. These comforting errors aren't mistakes. They're the brain's way of keeping a coherent story. Instead of leaving holes, your mind fills them in with what seems likely. Maybe you remember a childhood event with extra details, or a conversation that never happened exactly the way you think. Your brain makes the story whole, even if it's not entirely accurate. False memories show that perception isn't only about the present. Your mind constantly merges past experiences with current expectations, creating a seamless but sometimes imagined version of reality. And the comforting part is that it usually feels safe. The mind prefers a story over an incomplete picture, even if that story isn't perfectly true. Next time you notice a memory that feels vivid but questionable, smile at your brain's ingenuity. False memories aren't a flaw. They're evidence that your mind is always trying to make sense of the world, weaving continuity, meaning, and comfort out of fragments. Fact 43. The serial position effect. Here's a curious observation. When you try to remember a list of items, you're most likely to recall the first and last items better than the ones in the middle. This is called the serial position effect, and it reveals how memory prioritizes information. The brain is great at noticing beginnings and endings. The first items benefit from extra attention and rehearsal, while the last items remain in short-term memory. Middle items often get lost in the shuffle, quietly forgotten. It's not a failure, it's the brain efficiently managing its resources. The effect is fascinating because it shows how memory shapes perception of sequences, whether in lists, stories, or experiences. Understanding it can even be calming. If you forget something, it doesn't mean your mind is broken. It's simply following predictable patterns of attention and recall. So the next time you notice yourself remembering beginnings and endings more clearly, consider it a gentle reminder of how your memory naturally organizes information. Your mind isn't making mistakes. It's quietly prioritizing what matters most. Fact 44. Illusions of knowledge. Sometimes we feel like we know something, only to discover our understanding is superficial or even incorrect. These are called illusions of knowledge, and they're surprisingly common. The mind often overestimates its grasp on familiar concepts, filling gaps with assumptions or partial understanding. You might feel confident about a fact, a word, or a process, only to find that your knowledge is patchy when tested. The illusion arises because the brain prefers certainty. It's easier to feel confident than to sit with ambiguity. Interestingly, noticing these illusions can be calming rather than stressful. It reminds you that not knowing everything is natural, and that curiosity is more valuable than certainty. Awareness of the illusion encourages a gentle humility and a playful engagement with information. Next time you feel sure about something, pause. Appreciate the brain's confidence, even when it stretches the truth a little. Illusions of knowledge are a reminder that perception of understanding is as much about feeling safe as it is about accuracy. Fact 45. The illusion of truth effect. Here's an interesting quirk. The more often you hear a statement, the more likely you are to believe it, even if it's false. This is called the illusion of truth effect. Repetition makes the brain trust familiarity over accuracy. It happens because the mind is tuned to efficiency. If something feels familiar, it seems safer and more believable. That's why advertising slogans, repeated phrases, or even casual statements can feel true just from hearing them several times. The brain equates repetition with reliability, even if logic says otherwise. The effect is fascinating because it shows how perception of truth isn't purely rational. Familiarity, memory, and attention all play a role. And recognizing it can be oddly comforting. It reminds you that beliefs are flexible, and that doubt or curiosity is a natural part of thinking. Next time a repeated phrase feels convincing, notice it. The illusion of truth effect is a gentle reminder that perception of reality is influenced by repetition, memory, and familiarity, and your mind is quietly balancing all of it, moment by moment. Fact 46. How the brain fills in missing details. Have you ever looked at a familiar scene or object and noticed that your mind adds details you didn't actually see? That's your brain filling in missing information, and it's something it does constantly without you even realizing it. The mind doesn't like gaps. It prefers complete stories. So when sensory information is incomplete, memory is fuzzy, or vision is partially blocked, your brain invents details that make sense in context. You might remember a chair having a cushion when it doesn't, or a friend wearing a different shirt than they actually did. The brain isn't lying, it's just trying to create a smooth, coherent experience. This ability can be surprisingly comforting. Imagine walking into a dimly lit room. Your brain fills in familiar objects and textures, giving you confidence and stability even when information is missing. It's a quiet reassurance. The world isn't chaotic. Your mind can patch together reality in ways that feel seamless and safe. Interestingly, this process is one reason we sometimes misremember things in stories or photographs. Our minds merge expectation, habit, and context with reality, producing memories that feel complete but aren't exactly accurate, and that's okay. Your brain prioritizes fluidity over precision, creating an experience that feels whole and continuous. Next time you notice a memory or perception that seems a little off, remember that your brain is simply filling in gaps. It's not failing, it's working, creatively and gently, to maintain a coherent and calming sense of the world around you. Fact 47. The tip of the tongue phenomenon. You know that frustrating moment when a word or name feels just out of reach, hovering at the edge of your mind? That's the tip of the tongue phenomenon, a familiar quirk of memory and language. This happens because your brain retrieves information in stages. You might remember the first letter, the number of syllables or a similar word, but the exact word escapes you temporarily. The sensation can be maddening, yet it's actually a sign that your memory is working hard, connecting cues and partial knowledge to recover the answer. What's fascinating is how universal this experience is. Everyone experiences it, and the brain often resolves it within moments. Sometimes thinking about related concepts or taking a short break triggers the word to appear almost magically. There's something quietly reassuring about this phenomenon. It shows that memory isn't fragile. It's layered and complex. Temporary gaps are natural, and the brain is always actively searching, connecting, and preparing to deliver the information. Next time a word feels just out of reach, don't stress. Observe the feeling, let your mind wander, and notice how eventually the memory pops back. It's a small reminder that the mind is patient, persistent, and quietly clever. Fact 48. Confabulation and memory errors. Sometimes the mind tells stories that feel real, even if they never happened. This is called confabulation, when the brain fills in memory gaps with invented details, creating experiences that feel completely genuine. Confabulation isn't lying, it's the brain's attempt to maintain continuity. Memory is fragile, and when pieces are missing, the mind weaves in plausible events or explanations. You might confidently recall a conversation, a trip, or a detail from childhood that never occurred exactly as remembered. What's fascinating is that these false memories feel vivid. The brain packages them with emotional content, context, and sensory details, making them feel authentic. And this is one reason we often trust memory more than we should, because perception and emotion are intertwined. Confabulation can even be comforting. By creating a coherent story, the brain maintains a sense of self and continuity, giving you reassurance that life has order and meaning, even if the details shift slightly. Next time you notice a memory that doesn't match reality, smile. Confabulation is your mind's creative effort to keep your world coherent, fluid, and emotionally satisfying. Fact 49. Mental time travel illusions. Ever vividly imagine past events or project yourself into the future, only to realize that some details might be off? That's a mental time travel illusion, where the brain reconstructs memories or future scenarios with creative adjustments. The mind loves to move through time mentally. When recalling the past, it fills in gaps, merges events, or imagines conversations. When predicting the future, it combines knowledge, hopes, and fears to create scenarios that feel realistic. In both cases, the experience can feel immersive and entirely real, even if details are distorted. This illusion shows how flexible and adaptive the brain is. It allows you to relive cherished moments, learn from experiences, or imagine possibilities, all while maintaining a coherent sense of reality. And the experience can be soothing, mentally revisiting positive moments, or imagining peaceful scenarios can be calming, especially before sleep. Next time your mind wanders to memories or future plans, notice the gentle distortions. They're not errors. They're your brain crafting a seamless, comforting story that stretches across time. Fact 50. Memory distortions that feel real. Memory isn't perfect, and sometimes distortions creep in without you realizing it. You might recall a conversation, a place, or a sound in vivid detail, only to discover it didn't happen exactly that way. Yet the experience feels completely authentic. These distortions happen because memory isn't a static recording. It's dynamic, reconstructive, and influenced by emotion, context, and expectation. Your brain weaves together pieces of reality, imagination, and prediction to create memories that feel coherent. Interestingly, these distortions aren't stressful. They often feel natural and reassuring. The brain prioritizes continuity over precision, making experiences feel complete, smooth, and emotionally satisfying. It's a subtle form of the mind's creativity, quietly shaping perception into something digestible and comforting. Next time a memory feels slightly off, consider it a testament to your brain's ingenuity. Memory distortions remind you that perception is a living process, constantly adapting, interpreting, and gently shaping the story of your life. Fact 51. Inattentional blindness. Have you ever walked past something unusual and completely missed it, only to someone else point it out later? That's inattentional blindness, a curious trick of attention where your brain literally fails to notice things that are in plain sight. It happens because the mind can only focus on so much at once. When you're concentrating on a task, like counting people wearing hats or following a conversation, other details in the environment may vanish from awareness. The brain doesn't see them, not because they're hidden, but because attention is selective. This illusion is fascinating because it shows how perception isn't passive. You don't just see everything. Your brain filters and prioritizes, and sometimes that filtering is helpful. It keeps you focused, reduces overload, and even brings a sense of calm by narrowing awareness to what matters most. Next time you miss something obvious, don't worry. Inattentional blindness is a reminder that focus is a resource, and the mind balances efficiency with awareness. It's proof that perception is more about guidance than passively recording everything around you. Fact 52. Change blindness. Ever watch a scene where an object subtly changes and you don't notice at first? That's change blindness, a phenomenon where even significant alterations in a visual scene can go undetected if your attention isn't directed to them. The brain prioritizes consistency over constant comparison. It assumes stability in the world unless something catches attention. That's why a missing picture, a shifted item, or a small alteration can slip by unnoticed. The mind fills in gaps, maintaining the illusion of continuity. Interestingly, change blindness can be calming. It keeps reality from feeling chaotic by smoothing out every minor variation. Your perception is naturally selective, focusing on what seems essential, while letting non-critical details fade into the background. Next time you realize you've missed a small change, remember it's a sign of an efficient, relaxed brain, one that prioritizes mental energy and preserves a sense of stability, even if it sacrifices some detail. Fact 53. The invisible gorilla experiment. Here's a famous one. In a study, participants were asked to watch a video of people passing basketballs and count the passes. In the middle of the video, a person in a gorilla suit walked through, but about half the viewers never noticed it. This is known as the invisible gorilla experiment. The result highlights inattentional blindness in a striking way. When attention is focused on a specific task, even something as obvious and unusual as a gorilla can disappear from awareness. Your brain filters out what it deems irrelevant, creating a selective reality. It's fascinating because it shows how focus shapes perception. What we notice is often less about what's there and more about where we're directing attention. And there's a comforting side to this too. The brain protects you from sensory overload, letting you relax into a manageable world rather than scanning every detail. Next time your attention narrows, remember the gorilla. The mind isn't failing. It's choosing what to notice, and sometimes missing the unusual is just part of staying calm and focused. Fact 54. Attentional blink. Imagine looking at a rapid sequence of images or letters. You spot one target, but the second one appears so soon after that you completely miss it. That's attentional blink, a curious blind spot in time created by the limits of attention. Your brain can process only a short amount of information at a time. When a key stimulus captures focus, the next one arriving immediately afterward may be overlooked. It's a natural consequence of how attention and perception are temporally structured. This illusion is intriguing because it shows that perception isn't continuous. It's rhythmic, selective, and limited. And recognizing this can be oddly calming. It reminds you that you don't need to catch every detail to experience reality fully. The brain filters and prioritizes for efficiency and focus. Next time you miss something happening right after you're focused on another task, smile. Attentional blink is a gentle reminder that perception flows, pauses, and shifts in a perfectly natural rhythm. Fact 55. How focus shapes reality. It's amazing to think that reality isn't fixed. It's partly defined by where your attention goes. Focus determines what you notice, what you remember, and even how calm or engaged you feel. When you concentrate on one object, conversation, or sensation, your mind filters the rest, sometimes making changes or oddities invisible. This selective perception protects you from overload, ensures efficiency, and shapes your experience of the world. Focus can also be a tool for relaxation. Narrowing attention to a single sound, visual pattern, or tactile sensation can quietly calm the mind, guiding it away from distractions and worries. In a way, focus is like a gentle spotlight. Wherever it lands, perception and experience become sharper, and everything else fades softly into the background. Next time you notice yourself immersed in a task or a scene, appreciate the subtle power of focus. It doesn't just guide attention, it quietly molds your reality, revealing how perception is as much about choice as it is about the world around you. Fact 56. Perceptual load. Illusions. Have you ever felt like a crowded scene is almost impossible to process, yet some details still pop out effortlessly? That's perceptual load at work. The brain prioritizes certain elements depending on how much mental energy a scene requires, and this creates perceptual load illusions. When a scene is visually or mentally busy, the brain filters what's essential and lets other things fade into the background. For example, in a cluttered image, a bright or moving object can stand out immediately, while equally important details might go unnoticed. Your mind is balancing efficiency with awareness, focusing on what it can process best. What's fascinating is that this filtering is automatic and largely invisible. You might feel like you're seeing everything, but in reality, the brain has already decided what matters most. And there's a calming aspect. By reducing unnecessary information, perception becomes more manageable, less chaotic, and quietly soothing. Next time you notice yourself missing small details in a busy environment, remember it's not a flaw. It's the brain's clever way of protecting focus and promoting a smooth, relaxed perception of the world. Fact 57. The cocktail party effect. Ever been in a noisy room and suddenly hear your name mentioned across the crowd? That's the cocktail party effect, one of the brain's most fascinating selective attention tricks. Despite a flood of sounds, your mind can pick out personally relevant information instantly. This effect works because attention is guided by both expectation and importance. Background chatter fades into a blur while meaningful signals, like your name, jump to the front. It's a form of auditory filtering that keeps you tuned to what matters most, even when the environment is overwhelming. Interestingly, this selective attention can be relaxing. By focusing on the meaningful sounds, the brain ignores distractions, reducing sensory overload. It's a subtle example of how perception and attention work together to manage complexity, keeping the mind calm and alert simultaneously. Next time you catch a familiar voice in a noisy setting, notice how your attention naturally glides toward it. The cocktail party effect is a quiet reminder of the brain's ability to focus, filter, and create calm amidst the noise. Fact 58. Visual crowding illusions. Sometimes, objects that are perfectly visible in isolation become hard to recognize when surrounded by other shapes. This is called a visual crowding illusion, and it shows how context can dramatically influence perception. Your brain doesn't process every element independently. It considers surrounding details when interpreting visual information. When objects are too close together, the mind can't easily distinguish them, even though each one is technically visible. It's not a limitation, it's an adaptive strategy to simplify the visual world. The calming side of this illusion appears when you realize how selective perception is. Not everything is processed at once, allowing the brain to focus on what matters most. In a crowded visual scene, your mind gently prioritizes clarity over completeness, filtering details for efficiency. Next time a crowded image feels confusing at first glance, remember that your brain is simply managing perception thoughtfully. Visual crowding isn't an error, it's a sophisticated way the mind balances information and calm. Fact 59. Selective perception. Tricks. Perception isn't a passive recording of reality, it's a carefully curated experience. Selective perception tricks show how the mind emphasizes certain stimuli while ignoring others, shaping your awareness in subtle ways. For example, when looking for a friend in a busy park, you might fail to notice strangers moving around. Or when focusing on a task, background movements and sounds fade into oblivion. Your attention acts like a filter, highlighting what's important and dimming what isn't. The fascinating part is how naturally this happens. The brain doesn't need conscious effort. It constantly guides perception to reduce overload and prioritize meaningful input. And this selectivity can be surprisingly soothing, letting you navigate complex environments without feeling overwhelmed. Next time you focus on something and tune out distractions, notice how your mind quietly filters reality. Selective perception is a gentle reminder that awareness is guided, intentional, and naturally designed to support calm. Fact 60. How attention enhances relaxation. Attention isn't just about focus. It can actually enhance relaxation. When you deliberately guide your attention, the mind filters distractions and reduces mental clutter, creating a sense of calm and presence. For instance, focusing on your breathing, a gentle sound, or the texture of an object directs perception and quiets competing thoughts. The brain begins to process only what is relevant, and the filtered awareness feels soothing. Attention becomes a subtle tool for managing sensory input and mental energy. This phenomenon is why meditation, mindful observation, or even simply zoning in on a small detail can calm the nervous system. It's not magic. It's the natural way perception and attention interact to maintain balance and ease. Next time you want to relax, try guiding your attention deliberately. Notice how the mind filters the unimportant, emphasizes what matters, and creates a gentle, calming rhythm within your perception. Fact 61. The phi phenomenon. Have you ever watched a string of lights blink on and off and suddenly perceive smooth motion, even though each light is stationary? That's the phi phenomenon, one of the brain's most fascinating illusions. The brain loves to interpret sequences as continuous motion. When images or lights flash in rapid succession, it automatically fills in the gaps, creating the sensation of movement where there is none. That's why movies, animations, and even some holiday light displays feel so alive. They're simply taking advantage of this perceptual trick. What's fascinating is how effortless it feels. Your mind doesn't question the motion. It just flows naturally, bridging gaps in perception to form a coherent experience. And there's a soothing side to it. Seeing movement in patterns, even artificial ones, gently engages the brain while giving a quiet sense of predictability and rhythm. Next time you watch blinking lights or moving patterns, notice how easily the brain interprets motion. The phi phenomenon is a gentle reminder that perception is active, imaginative, and wonderfully adaptive. Fact 62. Apparent motion illusions. Related to the phi phenomenon are apparent motion illusions, instances where static images seem to move simply because of timing, placement, or visual cues. Think of flashing arrows that seem to glide or dots that appear to chase each other. The mind interprets sequential changes as movement, creating a flowing visual story from separate frames. The illusion works because the brain prioritizes continuity. It prefers smooth transitions over abrupt changes, filling in details to make sense of the scene. These illusions are more than tricks. They reveal how perception works in daily life. Your brain constantly seeks patterns, consistency, and motion, even where none exists. And when done gently, this process can be relaxing. Observing apparent motion encourages focus without strain, letting the mind drift into quiet engagement. Next time you notice a moving image that's actually still, pause for a moment and enjoy the seamlessness. Apparent motion illusions show the brain's playful ability to create flow, turning static patterns into gentle experiences for the mind. Fact 63. Depth perception. Tricks. Depth perception is one of the brain's most remarkable skills. It lets you navigate the world safely, judge distances, and interact with objects seamlessly. But sometimes, the brain is tricked into seeing depth differently than it actually exists. Tricks like overlapping shapes, shading, or perspective cues can create illusions of distance and volume. A flat drawing can appear three-dimensional, or a small object can seem farther away than it really is. The mind uses experience and context to interpret these cues, and occasionally it overcompensates, creating illusions. Interestingly, these tricks aren't confusing. They can be oddly satisfying. Watching depth illusions engage the brain in gentle problem-solving, letting you explore spatial relationships without stress. Your mind delights in figuring out what should be there versus what's actually there. Next time you notice a drawing or scene that feels deeper than it really is, enjoy it. Depth perception illusions highlight the brain's ability to interpret, adapt, and even entertain itself, all while quietly shaping your perception of space. Fact 64. Ames room illusion. The Ames room is a room designed to make people appear drastically bigger or smaller, depending on where they stand. It seems impossible at first, but it works because the room is trapezoidal, and the brain assumes it's rectangular. Your mind relies on familiar assumptions about geometry and perspective. When those assumptions are subtly manipulated, reality feels skewed. People standing in different corners appear to grow or shrink dramatically, and your brain is perfectly convinced, until you learn the trick. The Ames room is both playful and calming. Observing it gently reminds you that perception is constructed, not just recorded. Your mind can be fooled, but the illusion also engages curiosity and wonder, offering a quiet mental exercise that isn't stressful. Next time you see a space that feels off, remember the Ames room. It's a reminder that perspective shapes reality, and the brain gracefully adapts to visual cues, even when they lead to playful surprises. Fact 65. The Leaning Tower illusion. Have you ever looked at two identical photos of the Leaning Tower of Pisa side by side and noticed that one seems to tilt more dramatically than the other? That's the Leaning Tower illusion, a subtle but striking effect. The brain judges angles and alignment relative to surrounding context. When two identical images are placed side by side, subtle shifts in perspective trick the visual system into exaggerating the tilt. It's a reminder that perception isn't absolute. It's influenced by comparison, context, and expectation. Interestingly, this illusion can be quietly fascinating and relaxing. Watching the mind misjudge alignment reminds you that perception is interpretive, not literal. The brain fills in gaps to create a smooth experience, even if that means slightly bending reality. Next time you notice objects seeming tilted or leaning in comparison, take a moment to enjoy the subtle trickery. The Leaning Tower illusion is a gentle reminder that perception is playful, adaptive, and endlessly intriguing. Fact 66. Motion-induced blindness. Have you ever stared at a fixed point and noticed that nearby moving objects suddenly vanish from view? That strange disappearance is called motion-induced blindness, and it's one of the brain's most curious tricks. Your visual system constantly filters information to prevent overload. When a stationary target sits near a moving pattern, the brain sometimes suppresses it, making it disappear from perception temporarily. The object doesn't vanish physically, it's just hidden from awareness, like the mind quietly pressing pause on parts of the scene. What's fascinating is how gentle this illusion feels. It's not disorienting, it's a subtle reminder that perception isn't literal. The brain prioritizes motion and change over stability, guiding attention and keeping your mind engaged without overwhelming it. Next time you notice an object blinking out of sight while watching movement, let it happen. Motion-induced blindness is a soft illustration of how perception filters reality, helping the brain manage complexity while keeping your experience calm and organized. Fact 67. Rotating snakes illusion. Take a look at a circular pattern of colored shapes, and you might see them moving like flowing snakes. That's the rotating snake's illusion, a vivid example of how static images can appear to move. This illusion arises from the interaction of colour, contrast, and spatial arrangement. Tiny differences in timing and brightness fool the brain into interpreting motion where none exists. The eye sends signals that the brain interprets as flowing, giving the sensation of continuous rotation. What's fascinating is that you don't need to chase the movement. It happens automatically. Observing it can be strangely mesmerizing and calming, as your mind focuses on patterns and motion without conscious effort. The illusion gently engages attention, while providing a sense of visual rhythm. Next time you encounter a rotating snake's image, take a moment to enjoy the flowing effect. It's a playful reminder that perception is active, the brain is creative, and even still images can carry a quiet sense of motion. Fact 68. The waterfall. After Effect revisited. Remember the classic waterfall illusion, where staring at falling water makes stationary objects appear to drift upward afterward? That's called the motion after effect, and it shows how the brain adapts to prolonged motion. Neurons responsible for detecting movement temporarily fatigue after continuous stimulation. When you shift your gaze to a static scene, the surrounding neurons respond more strongly, creating the illusion of opposite motion. It's subtle, but undeniable once you notice it. The waterfall after effect is both fascinating and calming. It demonstrates that perception is dynamic, constantly adjusting to recent experiences. The brain doesn't passively record, it interprets, adapts, and even corrects for recent motion, maintaining balance and consistency in the visual world. Next time you see a slight drift after watching moving objects, appreciate the brain's adaptability. The motion after effect is a gentle nudge that perception is flexible, fluid, and quietly self-correcting. Fact 69. How the brain interprets 3D from 2D flat images often seem three-dimensional, and your mind knows it instantly. That's because the brain is skilled at interpreting depth from 2D cues like shading, perspective, and relative size. Even a simple drawing can appear volumetric, as the brain automatically applies rules of geometry and experience to guess spatial relationships. Shadows create a sense of height, converging lines suggest distance, and overlapping objects signal which is closer. The mind fills in what isn't physically there, creating a convincing illusion of depth. What's fascinating is how effortless this is. You don't need to consciously analyze cues. The brain does it automatically, quietly turning flat surfaces into immersive scenes. And there's a comforting side. Your perception of depth stabilizes the world, making it easier to navigate and understand. Next time a flat image seems three-dimensional, take a moment to notice the brain's quiet ingenuity. The mind constantly constructs reality, turning hints into immersive, calming experiences. Fact 70. Optical flow illusions. Ever felt like a pattern is moving around you, even though it's static? That's an optical flow illusion, created when visual cues suggest motion in your environment. It's often experienced when looking at repetitive patterns or textures, giving the sensation that you are moving through them. The brain interprets changes in position, contrast, and spacing as self-motion, even when there's none. This trick helps with navigation in real life, allowing the mind to anticipate movement and spatial relationships. In illusions, it creates a compelling sensation of drift or flow without actual motion. What's interesting is how subtly engaging it feels. The mind responds automatically, creating a sense of depth, direction, or speed. Observing optical flow can be surprisingly calming, as the brain aligns perception and expectation in a smooth, rhythmic way. Next time a pattern seems to drift or flow, enjoy the illusion. Optical flow reminds you that perception is predictive, adaptive, and quietly playful, gently guiding your awareness even when nothing is moving. Fact 71. Gestalt principles in illusions. Have you ever noticed that your mind tends to see patterns even when none are explicitly there? That's the power of Gestalt principles, a set of rules the brain follows to organize visual input into meaningful shapes and wholes. These principles explain why we naturally group objects by similarity, proximity, or continuity. For example, a series of scattered dots might instantly form a circle or a line because the mind prefers order over randomness. Illusions often exploit this tendency. creating images where shapes appear complete even when they're not. What's fascinating is how effortlessly this happens. You don't consciously assemble the patterns, your brain does it automatically. Gestalt principles are behind why some illusions feel so satisfying. The mind enjoys the harmony, even if it's invented. There's also a subtle calm in it. Watching these illusions reminds you that perception is organized and interprets chaos into simplicity. Your brain filters, groups, and smooths reality in ways that make the world easier to understand and gently comforting. Next time a pattern pops out of randomness, notice how the brain constructs meaning. Gestalt principles are a quiet demonstration of perception's creativity and efficiency, turning scattered inputs into an elegant whole. Fact 72. Figure ground reversals. Have you ever looked at an image and suddenly noticed two different shapes depending on where you focus? That's a figure ground reversal, a classic illusion where perception flips between what's foreground and background. Your mind naturally separates objects from their surroundings to make sense of visual scenes. But when an image is ambiguous, the roles can switch. One moment you see a vase, the next you see two faces staring at each other. The brain is actively interpreting relationships rather than passively recording them. This illusion is quietly fascinating because it shows how flexible perception is. It can flip perspectives effortlessly, creating a dynamic and engaging experience. And it's calming in a subtle way. Observing the switch reminds you that reality is interpreted, not fixed, and the mind can easily move between perspectives. Next time you notice a figure ground reversal, enjoy the gentle shift. It's a playful example of perception's adaptability, offering a small, satisfying mental twist without stress. Fact 73. Kinesia triangle illusion. Have you ever seen a triangle appear in an image, even though it isn't drawn? That's the Kinesia triangle, an illusion where the brain perceives a shape that isn't physically present. The mind completes missing information to form coherent objects. In this illusion, strategically placed Pac-Men and lines lead your brain to perceive a triangle floating above the shapes. Your eyes don't see it, but your perception fills it in anyway. What's fascinating is how effortlessly it happens. The brain doesn't debate it. It just creates a complete shape, illustrating how perception seeks simplicity and order. And there's a calming aspect to it. The illusion demonstrates how the mind naturally fills gaps, creating wholeness and reducing visual uncertainty. Next time you spot a Kinesia triangle, appreciate the mind's quiet inventiveness. Perception isn't just observation, it's an active, comforting construction of reality. Fact 74. The impossible triangle, Penrose triangle. Some illusions are impossible in real life but feel real at first glance, like the Penrose triangle. Look at it long enough, and your brain struggles to reconcile its corners and edges. It seems solid, yet contradictory. The brain assumes continuity and three-dimensionality. When presented with impossible angles, it attempts to interpret them as coherent, even though they cannot exist in reality. The result is a shape that feels convincing but defies logic. This illusion is fascinating and quietly engaging. It shows the brain's natural preference for consistency and completeness, and observing it can be surprisingly meditative. You watch, notice the conflict, and let the mind explore the paradox without pressure. Next time you encounter an impossible triangle, enjoy the gentle challenge. It's a reminder that perception is both constructive and playful, capable of experiencing the impossible without stress. Fact 75. Symmetry and aesthetic illusions. Have you noticed that symmetrical patterns feel satisfying, balanced, or even beautiful? That's no accident. The brain is drawn to symmetry, and illusions can exploit this preference to create pleasing or surprising effects. Symmetrical illusions often feel harmonious because the mind interprets balance as order. Even when the symmetry is incomplete or subtly off, the brain fills in gaps, creating a sense of wholeness. This automatic processing makes symmetrical patterns relaxing to observe and aesthetically engaging. Interestingly, this tendency is calming. Watching symmetrical illusions gently focuses attention, giving the mind a sense of rhythm and predictability. It's a simple reminder that perception doesn't just process information, it seeks beauty and order naturally. Next time you admire a symmetrical pattern or illusion, notice the quiet pleasure it brings. Symmetry is a testament to the mind's desire for balance, creating subtle satisfaction in perception without effort. Fact 76. The honeycomb illusion. Have you ever stared at a honeycomb-like pattern and noticed spots appearing and disappearing as you shift your gaze? That's the honeycomb illusion, a fascinating play on contrast and visual perception. Your brain constantly interprets brightness and edges, trying to distinguish shapes and patterns. In the honeycomb illusion, the arrangement of dark and light areas tricks the eye into seeing shimmering spots or flickers, even though the image is static. What you perceive depends on where you focus, the lighting, and tiny eye movements. The magic of this illusion is how effortlessly it captivates the mind. Watching the spots emerge and vanish can be strangely soothing. It engages attention gently while letting the brain explore patterns without strain. The flickering creates a dynamic experience, but one that is perfectly safe and relaxing. Next time you notice the honeycomb spots shifting, pause and enjoy the subtle dance. It's a quiet demonstration of how perception fills in details and creates movement, even in still images, offering the mind a gentle, meditative engagement. Fact 77. Perceptual grouping tricks. The brain loves to organize things. Perceptual grouping tricks show how objects are combined into meaningful wholes based on proximity, similarity, continuity, or common fate. For example, dots arranged closely together are perceived as a cluster, even if they are separated by space. Colors or shapes that repeat in a pattern naturally seem grouped. Your brain is wired to see order, creating a sense of structure and predictability from otherwise scattered information. These tricks are surprisingly comforting. The mind enjoys coherence, and perceptual grouping reduces the feeling of randomness or chaos in visual scenes. It's like watching the brain quietly tidy up a messy room, creating harmony and flow effortlessly. Next time you notice objects seemingly forming a group or pattern, take a moment to appreciate the mind's subtle work. Perceptual grouping isn't just about seeing, it's about feeling order, rhythm, and balance in the visual world. Fact 78. Visual filling in effects. Sometimes your brain completes missing information automatically, creating images that appear whole even when parts are absent. These are called visual filling in effects. A classic example is the blind spot in your eye. You don't see a gap in your vision because the brain fills it in with surrounding colors and patterns. Similarly, partial shapes or interrupted lines are often perceived as complete forms. Your mind prefers closure and completeness over ambiguity. What's fascinating is how seamless it feels. You don't notice the brain working, it just creates continuity. Observing this effect can be relaxing, as it shows that perception is constructive and the mind naturally smooths out imperfections, making the world feel whole and coherent. Next time your brain fills in missing details, notice the quiet genius behind it. Visual filling in is a gentle reminder that perception is more about creating harmony than recording every tiny detail. Fact 79. Illusions of motion in static patterns. Have you ever stared at a still image and felt it moving slightly? That's an illusion of motion, where static patterns trigger a sense of flow. These illusions work because the brain interprets contrast, color gradients, and shapes as cues for movement. Tiny eye movements also contribute, creating the sensation of dynamic change. Even though the image isn't moving, your perception becomes active and playful. What's striking is how immersive it can feel. Observing these illusions is almost hypnotic. The brain is engaged without stress, gently exploring motion in a safe, predictable way. It's a subtle way to captivate attention while calming mental chatter. Next time a static image seems to drift or swirl, pause and enjoy it. Motion illusions remind you that perception is active and imaginative, turning stillness into a quietly dynamic experience. Fact 80. Patterns that relax the mind. Some patterns have a natural calming effect. Repetition, symmetry, flowing lines, and soft contrasts can guide attention and soothe mental tension. The brain finds comfort in predictability and order. When observing rhythmic patterns or gently repeating shapes, perception naturally relaxes, reducing cognitive load. Even optical illusions designed with flow or symmetry can quiet the mind, turning simple observation into a meditative experience. Interestingly, these patterns don't need to be complex. Simple geometric arrangements, visual textures, or repeated motifs can gently capture focus, allowing the mind to rest while subtly exploring detail. Next time you find yourself drawn to a pattern, let your eyes linger. Patterns that relax the mind aren't just decorative, they're an invitation for perception to slow down, enjoy harmony, and quietly rejuvenate attention. Fact 81. The smile illusion. Have you ever looked at a face and felt unsure if the person was smiling or not? That's the smile illusion, a curious trick of visual perception and social interpretation. Our brains are finely tuned to recognize facial expressions. But when details are ambiguous or partially obscured, the mind can perceive a smile or a frown where none truly exists. Subtle differences in shadow, line curvature, or eye shape can dramatically change what we think we see. What's fascinating is how persuasive this illusion can be. A face that seems cheerful can evoke warmth and calm, even if it's actually neutral. The brain prioritizes socially relevant cues, filling in emotions based on expectation and context. This automatic interpretation can be comforting. It's a reminder that humans are wired to detect friendliness and connection. Next time a face seems to smile at you ambiguously, notice the mind's role in creating the emotion. The smile illusion is a gentle illustration of how perception and social intuition intertwine, quietly guiding interpretation and emotional response. Fact 82. Facial expression. Misinterpretation. Ever thought someone looked angry or upset only to find out they were perfectly neutral? Facial expression misinterpretation shows how easily our brains assign emotion based on subtle cues. Expressions are complex and sometimes ambiguous. A slight eyebrow raise, a tiny smirk, or a fleeting wrinkle can shift perception dramatically. The mind instinctively interprets these signals, often relying on context or personal expectation rather than objective reality. Interestingly, these errors can actually be comforting. They show the brain's natural tendency to anticipate social intent, helping you navigate relationships safely. Even if a misinterpretation occurs, the process reflects adaptability and care in social perception. Next time you misread an expression, remember the brain is doing its best to make sense of the social world. Facial expression misinterpretation is a subtle reminder that perception is both interpretive and protective, quietly guiding interactions. Fact 83. Emotion contagion. Illusions. Have you ever felt happier after seeing someone else smile, or more anxious after witnessing someone's stress? That's emotion contagion at work, a psychological illusion where observed emotions influence your own. The brain mirrors expressions and body language automatically. Subtle cues trigger corresponding neural responses, so you catch the feeling even if you consciously don't want to. This illusion is strongest in social contexts, where perception of others' moods shapes your own experience. What's fascinating is how gentle it can feel. Smiles, calm gestures, or laughter can quietly elevate mood, creating a soothing, shared emotional rhythm. The brain uses perception to foster connection, making experiences of social comfort almost automatic. Next time you notice your mood shifting in response to someone else, appreciate the subtle power of emotion contagion. It's a reminder that perception isn't just visual, it's deeply social and quietly shaping emotional experiences. Fact 84. Social proof and perception. Tricks. Ever followed the crowd without realizing why? That's social proof, a psychological illusion where perception of others' behavior influences your own. Humans are wired to look for cues in the environment, and seeing others act a certain way often signals what's safe, correct, or desirable. Even subtle gestures, like glances or posture, can guide perception and behavior without conscious thought. Interestingly, this tendency can be calming. Social proof provides reassurance. The brain interprets consensus as a stabilizing cue, reducing uncertainty and decision fatigue. Watching patterns of behavior helps the mind predict outcomes and feel safe. Next time you notice yourself influenced by others, remember that perception is naturally guided by context. Social proof is an elegant reminder that the brain uses both observation and interpretation to maintain balance and calm. Fact 85. The spotlight effect. Ever feel like everyone notices every tiny detail about you, even when they probably don't? That's the spotlight effect, an illusion where perception of attention is exaggerated. Your brain magnifies self-awareness, making you think you're under constant scrutiny. In reality, people are usually focused on themselves, and your quirks often go unnoticed. This illusion shows how perception can be biased by expectation rather than fact. Interestingly, recognizing the spotlight effect can be relaxing. Understanding that attention is limited frees you from unnecessary worry, letting perception align more with reality. You notice less imagined judgment and more actual experience. Next time you feel observed, pause and consider the illusion at play. The spotlight effect is a gentle reminder that perception is not always literal, and the mind can choose perspective over imagined scrutiny. Fact 86. Illusions of familiarity. Have you ever met someone and felt like you'd known them forever, even though you just met? That's an illusion of familiarity, where the brain interprets novelty as something known. This illusion arises because the mind looks for patterns and matches new experiences with stored memories. A face, voice, or even mannerism can trigger a sense of recognition, creating a comforting feeling of connection. It's the brain's way of making the unfamiliar feel safe and approachable. What's fascinating is how convincing this can be. You feel trust or warmth almost automatically, even if there's no real history. It's subtle, soothing, and helps navigate social interactions by reducing uncertainty. Your brain is essentially whispering, "This is safe. You've encountered something like this before." Next time you feel instant familiarity with someone or something, notice the gentle work of your perception. Illusions of familiarity remind you that the brain seeks comfort, continuity, and ease, quietly shaping experience. Fact 87. Implicit bias as a mental illusion. Even when we try to be objective, the brain sometimes plays tricks on us. Implicit bias is a mental illusion where unconscious associations influence perception and judgment without awareness. Your mind categorizes experiences, people, and objects automatically, often based on patterns from past experiences or cultural exposure. These associations can create perceptions that feel factual, but are actually filtered through mental shortcuts. It's a hidden influence shaping thought and behavior subtly. Interestingly, recognizing these biases can be reassuring. It shows that perception is not fixed, it's interpretive. Awareness allows the mind to correct or reinterpret these illusions, turning potential misperceptions into opportunities for reflection and growth. Next time you notice an automatic judgment, consider it a gentle illusion. Implicit bias is a quiet reminder that perception is active, layered, and adaptable, always offering a chance to see more clearly. Fact 88. The halo effect. Have you ever assumed someone's good qualities in one area extend to others? That's the halo effect, a mental illusion where a single trait colors your entire perception of a person. For example, if someone is attractive or kind, your brain might unconsciously assume they are intelligent, trustworthy, or competent. This effect arises because the mind seeks coherence. It wants people to be consistent and predictable. While it can mislead, it also creates a comforting sense of order in social perception. The fascinating part is how automatic it feels. You don't consciously apply the halo. The brain does it silently, smoothing impressions into simple, elegant judgments. And there's a subtle calming effect. It reduces uncertainty in social encounters by giving a quick, unified assessment of others. Next time you notice yourself generalizing someone's qualities, appreciate the mind's natural tendency to create coherence. The halo effect is a gentle reminder that perception is interpretive, protective, and quietly guiding social experience. Fact 89. How perception shapes feelings. Our emotions are deeply tied to perception. The way we interpret events, people, and situations can create illusions that shape how we feel, often without realizing it. For instance, two people can experience the same scene, but one may feel comfort while the other feels unease. The brain interprets sensory input through past experiences, expectations, and context, constructing emotional responses alongside perception. This process is automatic, seamless, and surprisingly powerful. What's fascinating is the control this gives you. By guiding attention and framing perception, it's possible to influence mood gently. Observing beauty, symmetry, or comforting patterns can evoke calm, joy, or curiosity without conscious effort. Next time you notice a shift in feeling, consider the role of perception. How you interpret the world quietly shapes your emotions, making mental experience an active and subtle creation. Fact 90. Comforting illusions of human connection. Sometimes, the brain creates the sense of connection, even when social contact is minimal. Seeing a smile, imagining a friendly face, or recalling a kind interaction can produce a comforting illusion of human connection. These illusions arise because the mind thrives on social bonds. Even imagined or partially observed cues trigger warmth, trust, and security. It's a gentle reminder that connection is partly perception. The brain can evoke companionship without it being fully present. Interestingly, this can be relaxing. Feeling understood or acknowledged, even indirectly, reduces stress and fosters a sense of belonging. Perception creates these soothing experiences automatically, highlighting the brain's natural inclination for social comfort. Next time you feel subtle connection in an unexpected moment, enjoy it. Comforting illusions of human connection reveal how perception shapes emotional safety, letting the mind experience warmth and reassurance effortlessly. Fact 91. Hypnagogic hallucinations. Have you ever drifted into sleep and suddenly saw shapes, lights, or fleeting images that weren't really there? Those are hypnagogic hallucinations, a curious trick of the mind as it transitions between wakefulness and sleep. During this state, the brain's visual and sensory systems start to drift, blending dreamlike activity with reality. You might see geometric patterns, shadowy figures, or brief flashes of light. The experience is vivid but usually harmless, simply reflecting the brain's shift into the dreaming state. What's fascinating is how effortless it feels. Your mind spontaneously generates imagery, exploring possibilities while your body relaxes. For many, observing these gentle hallucinations can even be calming, providing a sense of wonder and curiosity right before sleep. Next time you notice fleeting images as you're drifting off, don't be alarmed. Hypnagogic hallucinations are a quiet demonstration of how perception changes with consciousness, offering a gentle bridge into rest. Fact 92. Floating and falling sensations before sleep. Have you ever felt like you're gently floating or suddenly plummeting as you drift off? Those sensations, often called hypnic jerks or floating illusions, are surprisingly common. As the body relaxes and the nervous system transitions to sleep, the brain misinterprets muscle relaxation and shifting signals, creating the perception of motion. You might feel a brief weightless rise or a sudden drop, often accompanied by a quick startle or twitch. Interestingly, these sensations are completely normal and can even be soothing once you notice the pattern. Many people find them oddly gentle, like the brain is experimenting with movement in a safe, controlled way. Paying attention calmly can make falling asleep feel playful rather than startling. Next time you float or fall as sleep approaches, embrace the illusion. It's a reminder that perception is flexible, and even sensations that surprise us can quietly ease the mind toward rest. Fact 93. Visual snow and calm imagery. Have you noticed a faint static-like pattern in your vision sometimes, like tiny dots across your field of view? That's called visual snow, a subtle visual phenomenon that some people notice more at night or in low light. The brain constantly processes visual input, even when there's minimal external stimulation. In this case, tiny, random signals create a textured overlay, like the world has a soft static filter. While it can feel strange, observing it slowly and without worry can turn it into a calming visual pattern, almost meditative in nature. What's fascinating is how the brain transforms randomness into perceivable textures. When approached calmly, these quiet visual effects can guide attention gently and even help the mind settle before sleep. Next time you notice visual snow, try observing it as soft imagery. It's an example of perception's subtle artistry, turning ordinary neural activity into a gentle experience for the eyes and mind. Fact 94. Sleep paralysis. Illusions. Sleep paralysis is a strange moment between wakefulness and sleep, when the body feels frozen but the mind is aware. During this state, the brain may also produce vivid sensory illusions, from shadows moving in the room to pressure on the chest. These experiences occur because parts of the brain are awake while motor signals are temporarily suppressed. The mind fills in the gap with familiar patterns, often producing dreamlike imagery over a real environment. Though startling at first, understanding the illusion can make it less frightening. Interestingly, some people learn to use sleep paralysis to observe sensations calmly, treating them as a bridge to lucid dreams or gentle visualization exercises. It's a reminder that perception actively constructs experience, even when the body isn't fully responsive. Next time sleep paralysis occurs, focus on the awareness rather than the sensation. The illusions it produces are creative demonstrations of how perception blends wakefulness and sleep seamlessly. Fact 95. Lucid dreaming perception. Tricks. Lucid dreaming is when you become aware you're dreaming while still inside the dream. The brain essentially tricks itself into experiencing a full world while remaining conscious, allowing control over imagery, actions, and sensations. During lucid dreams, perception is fluid. You might fly, explore imaginary landscapes, or interact with dream characters, all constructed by the mind. This state highlights how the brain can simulate reality entirely, creating experiences that feel as vivid as waking life. Lucid dreaming can also be relaxing. Knowing that it's your mind creating the scenario allows for playful exploration and gentle engagement with perception. It's an opportunity to observe the brain's imagination in real time, blending control and wonder. Next time you enter a lucid dream, savor the perception tricks at play. Your mind has created a safe, immersive space, demonstrating the remarkable creativity and adaptability of human perception. Fact 96. Auditory sleep illusions. Have you ever heard sounds as you're drifting off, like faint whispers, music, or even a door creaking, only to realize there's nothing there? These are auditory sleep illusions, the brain's way of blending wakefulness with early sleep perception. During this transition, the auditory system remains active while the conscious mind is relaxing. The brain may interpret random neural activity or background noise as recognizable sounds. Sometimes it creates entirely new auditory experiences, like a distant melody or gentle humming. Interestingly, these illusions can be soothing. Soft, imagined sounds often feel comforting and rhythmic, creating a gentle auditory environment for the mind to settle into sleep. Paying attention calmly allows the brain to drift naturally without alarm or frustration. Next time you hear faint nighttime sounds that aren't really there, notice the mind's playful role. Auditory sleep illusions are a quiet reminder that perception continues even as the body rests, guiding the brain toward calm and sleep. Fact 97. The mind's nighttime. Visualizations. Have you ever closed your eyes and seen faint shapes, colors, or scenes before fully falling asleep? These nighttime visualizations are a normal part of the mind's transition into rest. As the brain reduces sensory input from the outside world, it begins to simulate images internally. Flickers of color, geometric patterns, or dreamlike snippets appear, often without any conscious control. These visualizations reflect the brain's creative and predictive nature, gradually easing into the dream state. What's fascinating is how effortlessly it happens. You don't need to try. The images unfold naturally, like a gentle show for the mind. Observing them without judgment can be calming, helping the brain relax into sleep rhythmically and peacefully. Next time your eyes are closed and colors or shapes appear, enjoy the quiet performance. Nighttime visualizations reveal the brain's ability to create experience even in stillness, guiding attention toward rest. Fact 98. Perceptual drift while falling asleep. Have you noticed your sense of space, time, or even body position subtly shifting as you fall asleep? That's perceptual drift, a gentle illusion created by the brain's slowing transition into sleep. Signals from the senses and vestibular system gradually lose precision, and the mind fills in gaps to maintain continuity. You might feel like you're floating, tilting, or slowly sliding, even while lying still. The brain is blending reality with its own predictions to smooth the passage from wakefulness to sleep. Interestingly, this drift can be calming. Observing the gentle motion without trying to correct it encourages relaxation. The mind feels less bound by physical constraints, creating a subtle sense of weightlessness that eases entry into sleep. Next time you sense yourself drifting while falling asleep, notice the gentle illusion. Perceptual drift is a quiet demonstration of how perception adapts, smoothing reality for rest and relaxation. Fact 99. Repetitive patterns to induce sleep. Repetition is powerful, even for the mind. Observing or imagining rhythmic patterns, like waves, ticking clocks, or softly repeating shapes, can gently guide perception and induce sleep. The brain thrives on predictability. Repetitive stimuli reduce cognitive load and encourage a steady focus, allowing attention to drift without strain. Even visual or auditory illusions with subtle repetition can provide this effect, creating a calm, hypnotic environment for the mind. What's fascinating is how natural this is. The brain doesn't need to work hard to interpret repetition. It simply relaxes, finding comfort in rhythm and order. This principle is why bedtime routines, white noise, and patterned visualizations feel so effective. Next time you notice yourself drawn to gentle repetition, let it guide you. Patterns can subtly soothe perception, turning mental focus into a quiet, restful journey towards sleep. Fact 100. How understanding illusions can soothe the brain. By now, you've explored countless ways the mind creates, adapts, and sometimes misleads perception. Understanding these illusions is more than fascinating, it's calming. Recognizing that the brain actively interprets the world, fills in gaps, and generates experiences helps reduce tension. Knowing that visual, auditory, and sensory tricks are normal allows you to let go of worry, judgment, or confusion. The mind can focus on rhythm, patterns, and gentle engagement rather than stress. Illusions, in a sense, act like guides. They show how perception works, revealing the brain's creativity, predictability, and capacity for calm. Observing these tricks without needing to control them encourages relaxation, helping the body and mind drift naturally towards sleep. Next time your senses seem to play tricks, remember the quiet power of understanding. Illusions are not just curiosities, they are tools for soothing the brain, turning awareness into a peaceful passage into rest.